Uggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. And today we're going to be taking a question from Vin. He doesn't say what his call sign is or where he is, but we'll assume he's somewhere in Middle America. He says, I watched your latest video on grounding and bonding. My current setup has the shack and station ground at one end of the house. In order to bond my station ground rod to the house ground rod at the service entrance, I would have to run a large wire all the way around the house. The distance is about 100 feet. That seems far longer than it should to be effective. What should one do when two grounds are so far apart? The short answer to your question is that you should bond them together. Now, there are a couple secrets to this. I would recommend, since we're dealing with RF here, that you use stranded number 6 bare copper wire. And it can be soft drawn, which you can get from Home Depot or anybody like that. They can get you this wire. Now, 100 feet of that's going to be a little expensive, but I think you'll see in a moment here how we do that in such a way as to make it effective. Now, your station ground rod is designed to take lightning and stuff like that and put it down into the earth. Also, properly grounding your station, or earthing it, as some people call it, is a great way to reduce noise that is picked up from man-made sources around there, especially noise, so-called common mode noise, that comes on the outside of the shield of the cable. That's all taken to ground right there at that ground rod and lightning arrestor. Now, the best practices, the current best practices for amateur radio grounding are found in the ARRL book called Grounding and Bonding for the Radio Amateur, and it's edition number 2. The second edition. It's very important to get that because this has been put together with a very good thorough look at the National Electric Code. Just as an aside, it's interesting to note that the National Electrical Code is put out by the National Fire Insurance Association. Electrical, fire, well, yeah. Because the people who insure homes for fire know that most of those fires are started because of faulty electrical wiring, okay? So the other input for this is a book put out by Motorola. And if you look at my original grounding and bonding video, number 8, which is quite a few years old now, it tells you all about this Motorola book, which has a whole section in there on grounding communications facilities, especially mountaintop facilities that are often hit by lightning. And it's really a very, very interesting read and something that you should take a look at. I have drawn here a diagram of your house. This is from the top, okay? So here's your roof line and everything. Here's your front door. Here's your driveway, whatever. And the distance from the station ground rod around to the utility ground is 100 feet. Okay, now you've got ground rods here. Here's a ground rod. Here's a ground rod right here. And the reason that we bond them together is so that if this side voltage goes high due to a lightning strike, this side voltage will go up just as much, and you won't have a voltage differential. It's the voltage differential that causes things to break. So, first of all, number 6 or thicker, which would be number 4 or number 2, 0, double aught, whatever. Number 6, stranded, bare, copper wire, okay? And you're going to bury it. Now, the reason for burying it is to make the wire kind of act like it's a ground rod. Now, let's do even better than that. Let's put in a ground rod here, and here, and here, and here, and here, about 16 feet apart. Okay, now that's 20 bucks, 40 bucks, 60 bucks, 80 bucks, 100 bucks. Okay, I know that's expensive, but you also bond these here with a compression connection, not soldering. Don't ever solder the ground, because you get a lot of current through it for a very short period of time if it gets hit by lightning strike. And then what happens is that will actually boil the solder and cause it to splatter and lose your connection there. So these are all standard compression fittings, which you can pick up at Home Depot and so on. Okay, now all of this should be underground. Is it okay to leave a little bit poking above? Yeah, so you know where they are, if you will, but the compression connection should be below ground. You can weld these. After all, it's copper to copper. These are steel poles coated with copper. There's a thermal weld material that you can buy, and you put this around the wire. It's got a little ceramic thing to hold the flame, and you light it, and it causes the copper powder in there to melt, and it will weld the copper wire to the ground rod. That way you've got something that, since it's welded, it's not going to require much maintenance, whereas the compression connections here have to be checked every so often. Now, I want to point out that if you've got your antenna out here, and I'll just pretend this is a vertical, okay, and you have a ground rod, you can drive a ground rod at the antenna, bring this back to your station ground where your lightning arrestor is, and put in a couple extra ground rods here if you want to. Now, what do I consider the minimum? And now this is a case where amateur best practice is way beyond what most hams do, way beyond. Most hams will put this in. Then, once you put this in, they'll run a wire this distance to connect it to this, which will take care of normal fluctuations in voltage. Okay, now, one of the things you have to recognize is that your power supply black wire out is ground for DC, and it is connected across to the green wire ground, which is connected through your electrical to this ground right here. So if you get a voltage differential in there, you can see where you might have problems with some wiring. So start with this, go to that, put a ground rod out here, go to that. This is again number 6 stranded bare wire. And then when you want to, as you get the money for them, these are 20 bucks a piece or so, pound in ground rods and make thermal or mechanical connections, no soldering, across this whole thing to be fully grounded. Now, best practices grounding has you also running this wire around the house, under the driveway and over to here, and putting ground rods here. And you can, the services will come and run a pipe, usually a plastic pipe, underneath your driveway for you. They have sneaky ways of doing that. And so you can run the pipe under, and you can end up with a beautifully grounded house. That is the best case, okay? As I mentioned, this is best practice and is one of the areas in amateur radio where most hams are far behind so-called best practice. So I would suggest that you take a look at that book, get that book, read it, and start making a list of things you eventually want to do. First and foremost is the station ground. Second is bonding the station ground to the utility ground with a bare, number 6, stranded copper wire that's buried that goes all the way to your utility ground. Okay? So lots of things you can do with that. Now, who's going to force you to do this? Well, if you have equipment damage because of lightning, the ARRL insurance, equipment insurance, will cover that. If a lightning strike sets your home on fire and the insurance company says that, well, it struck your antenna, and it shouldn't do that because that's what caused the fire, they're going to look to see if you've done this kind of grounding. If you have, you're okay. If you have, you're probably not going to get the fire in the first place. But something to look about. I don't want to scare you. I just want to say that we need to move toward best practice. So there you have it. Now, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, and that sponsor is you. You are patrons, you're PayPal supporters, you're tip jar, tip leavers, and all the other things like that, or you bought a t-shirt off the web page or whatever it may be. You certainly support this channel. In fact, just by subscribing, you support this channel. It helps the channel to grow and reach more people. I do plan to be at Dayton this year, and maybe we'll see you there. Until we next meet, 73.